Welcome to Universe of Love and Anime, where heartfelt love stories come alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to spread love and hope. Thank you for joining us now. Let's dive into today's touching story. Growing Heart. It was almost midnight when my son rushed me to the hospital as my fever soared uncontrollably. My whole body was burning, my mind spinning, and just when I thought things couldn't get worse, fate decided to throw one more cruel joke at me. Standing right there in front of me was Ison, my ex-boyfriend from 6 years ago. His eyes locked onto me with that familiar mocking smile I hadn't seen in years. He stared at me like he was savoring the moment and said with his signature sarcasm, "A single mother at the hospital? So where's the child's father?" Before I could even react, my son, quick and composed as ever, stepped forward and answered, "My dad passed away." Ison raised his eyebrows slightly, clearly amused by my son's maturity, then added, "I see. Well, it's only natural to die with age. I suppose you inherited quite a bit from him, Susanna." His words cut like a knife, but I held my ground, gave him a calm glance from head to toe, and simply nodded. Everything you say is true. In reality, life was nothing like his assumptions. Every month, I was trapped under my editor's endless pressure to deliver my manuscript on time. This month was no exception. That morning she had called me, her tone full of her usual threat. "Susanna, if I don't get your manuscript before the end of the month, you won't be paid." She always knew exactly where to hit. Without that money, I wouldn't even be able to support my son. I forced out my usual promise. "Don't worry, I'll deliver it on time. I swear I've never missed a deadline." But even my son, sitting nearby watching TV, couldn't hold back a snarky comment as he glanced at me with a little smirk. "Mommy, you're lucky lightning only strikes bad people. Otherwise, you'd have been struck long ago." Though his words were brutally honest, I could only maintain a calm, composed smile. The truth was, I, Susanna, a romance novelist, lived in a permanent state of last-minute panic, drowning in non-stop writing marathons just to get the manuscript finished and pay the bills. This time, though, my body finally gave out. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I collapsed from a high fever in the middle of the night, forcing my son to take me to the hospital, and that's how I ended up running into Ison again, the man who didn't know he was actually the father of my child. Thankfully, my son looked so much like me that any dangerous recognition was avoided, sparing us an ugly custody battle. Ison and I had once been classmates in college. Back then, he was the brightest star in the medical school, handsome, brilliant, and infamous for his sharp tongue. Countless beautiful girls had tried to pursue him, only to be driven away by his biting sarcasm. But I was the only one foolish enough or brave enough to chase after him, and somehow, I succeeded. As for why we broke up, well, that's a story better left buried. Now, after 6 years, Ison wasted no time flaunting his sarcasm again. I played along, agreeing with whatever he said, but he still looked at me like he had just bitten into something bitter. Right now, though, sarcasm wasn't my biggest concern. I was barely standing on my own feet. "Doctor, please treat me first. If you keep delaying, your patient might really die," I joked, but as soon as the words left my mouth, my legs buckled and I collapsed. My son reacted instantly, grabbing my arm and preventing me from hitting the ground. "Son, your mother only weighs 40 kilos. You won't be crushed," I joked weakly. As I found myself unexpectedly in Ison's arms, I quickly tried to cut off any sarcastic comments before they could start. "Don't misunderstand. I just have weak legs from the fever. I'm not throwing myself into your arms." My son chimed in, ever so helpful. "I can testify. Mommy didn't throw herself into his arms. Though, she does say she wants to find me a handsome stepdad." "Martin, stop talking," I hissed, embarrassed beyond words. "If you can't explain it right, don't explain at all. Mommy isn't looking for a stepfather." Of course, it was partly my fault for joking too much while watching dramas with him, always saying I wanted to find a young, handsome man. Ison, naturally, seized the chance to deliver another jab, still dreaming of marrying young and rich. Huh? You really haven't changed. His words stung, but I forced out an awkward laugh, unable to come up with a comeback. Under his gaze, I felt once again like the same shallow girl who couldn't handle being alone. But I reassured myself silently, once I walked out of this hospital, I wouldn't see him again. I swore that if I ever had to go to a hospital again, it definitely wouldn't be this one. But fate clearly had other plans. Lying on the hospital bed receiving an infusion, I watched as my son and my ex conversed as if they were old friends, creating an unexpectedly harmonious scene. "Kid, you look pretty sharp," Ison said, surprising me with what almost sounded like a compliment. "Of course. My mom has great genes," my son replied proudly. "Not very humble, are you?" "That must have come from me," I teased while sneaking a glance at Ison, who wore a smug, "I'm watching you" expression. I quickly turned on my awkward smile mode, convincing myself that if I didn't feel awkward, someone else would. Ison threw me a sideways glance but ignored me and continued speaking to my son. "How old are you?" The moment he asked that question, my heart nearly stopped. I jumped in before my son could speak, answering too loudly, "4 years old." Both of them turned to look at me. Even the patient in the neighboring bed gave me a strange glance. My nerves were about to explode, but hiding my son's age was all that mattered. Ison must not know the truth. Yet despite all my planning, I had forgotten one important detail: my son's brutal honesty. "But mommy, didn't you say not to lie?" "I'm turning 5 this year, not 4. "Why did you lie to uncle?" My face froze in horror. I felt like there were 3 thick black lines running down my forehead. My son, in his innocent honesty, had once again sabotaged me. "If I say I made a mistake, would you believe me?" I asked with a forced smile, desperately trying to stay calm while my nerves were on the verge of collapse. With Ison's brilliant mind, was he already starting to suspect? His enigmatic smile made me even more anxious. I tried to hold my ground, but then, in a panic, I blurted out, "Don't get me wrong. When we broke up, I wasn't pregnant." The words slipped out before my brain could stop them, and the moment they did, I realized my mouth had betrayed me again. Ison's expression subtly shifted, no longer as sharp as before. I quietly exhaled, thinking maybe I had successfully diverted his suspicion. I barely had time to catch my breath before his next words struck me like a punch to the gut. "Of course, I wouldn't misunderstand. A woman as vain and eager to marry a millionaire as you couldn't possibly have been pregnant with my child." His voice was soaked in sarcasm, and though I was used to his sharp tongue, my heart still clenched at his cruel words. But I couldn't even defend myself because he wasn't wrong. I was the one who had often joked about marrying rich, and I had openly admitted my vanity more times than I could count. There was no way to deny it now. Standing there, looking at him in his white coat, tall, mature, more stable and handsome than ever, memories of how it all began came flooding back to me. Our first encounter had been purely by chance. My classmates and I were heading back to the dorm after class when we happened to walk past the library. A girl was confessing her feelings to him at that very moment. His back was to us, but we could clearly hear him rejecting her in a cold and blunt tone, causing the girl to burst into uncontrollable sobs. Back then, I was young and had a bad habit of interfering in other people's business. I couldn't stand how cruel he sounded. I thought, if you're going to reject someone, at least don't humiliate them. Fueled by impulse, I broke free from my roommate who tried to hold me back and charged toward him, shouting, "Are you even a man? Why do you have to bully her like that?" But the moment he turned around and I saw his face, all my anger vanished into thin air. My breath caught in my throat. This boy was too handsome. My original righteous fury disappeared completely as I found myself simply admiring his flawless features. I rejected her confession. "Do you have any objections?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine. Panicking, I quickly waved my hands and stammered, "No objections, none at all." Even now, thinking back to that day made me feel just as flustered as I was then. After he left, my roommate explained everything about him to me. Ison, the academic genius of the medical school, the most handsome guy on campus, a flower high up on a mountain no one could reach. He was famous for his sarcasm that scared away most girls who dared to confess to him, though plenty still tried. And yes, I soon became one of those girls who tried. From that moment on, I started chasing after him relentlessly. Wherever he went, I followed. If he went to class, I sat in and audited. If he went to the library, I pretended to read. If he played basketball, I was there handing him water. I used every excuse I could to be near him. Eisen rejected my confessions countless times, always with his sharp, merciless sarcasm. But his words never bothered me because I had developed an extremely thick skin. One time, while we were both in the library, he asked me seriously, "Susanna, what exactly do you like about me?" Dropping my usual playful tone, I looked him straight in the eyes and answered sincerely, "I like everything about you. No matter what you look like or say, I like you." He sighed and replied, "Susanna, I have no intention of dating anyone in college. Don't waste your time on me." But I smiled and said, "Then I'll wait in line. Once you graduate, I'll be the first." Looking back, I realize how brave I was back then. I wouldn't have the courage to say anything like that now. I followed him around for an entire month. Eventually, not only did everyone in the medical school know me, but nearly the entire campus knew that Susanna from the literature department was madly pursuing the academic genius Eisen. Even the school forum was buzzing with bets on whether or not I could win him over, though most people mocked me, saying it was impossible. My roommates tried to talk sense into me. "Susanna, you're the flower of our literature department. Why cling to just one tree?" But I only smiled and replied, "Because Eisen is the tallest, most beautiful tree, and I'm willing to hang from it." One day, knowing Eisen had anatomy class, I bought him some milk tea and waited outside his lab. But instead of Eisen, Gabriella showed up his friend and also the daughter of his tutor. Since I started chasing Eisen, I had heard her name countless times. Many said she was the most suitable match for him. Of course, I strongly disagreed. In my eyes, Eisen was mine. Gabriella approached with her usual arrogance and said, "Susanna, do you really think that making such a spectacle will make Eisen accept you? You should give up while you still can." Her smug attitude annoyed me, but I kept my composure. I like him. How I pursue him is my decision, and whether I give up or not is also my decision. Perhaps my refusal to back down irritated her even more, and she lashed out without thinking. "A girl like you doesn't deserve Eisen. He's a top student. He'll go abroad and become one of the best doctors. You're just a mediocre literature student who can't even find a job, let alone help him in any way." Her words cut deep, but I stood my ground and said firmly, "I don't need anyone's help." Just then, Eisen walked out with a serious look on his face. Without saying a word, he approached me, took my hand, and led me away. I was so stunned I couldn't react for several moments. We walked a long distance before I finally spoke up, still holding tightly onto his hand. "Eisen, does this mean you've accepted my confession?" After chasing him for so long, I was desperate for a clear answer. He looked at me calmly and said, "I don't hold hands with girls who aren't my girlfriend." That night, I was so excited I couldn't sleep at all. Being with him turned out to be far easier than I had ever imagined. Though he seemed distant on the surface, he was actually incredibly kind to those close to him, even if his sarcasm never went away. Every morning, he would wait outside my dorm to bring me breakfast, and whenever he had free time, he would walk me to class, doing everything a boyfriend should do. We had dreams together, plans to study abroad for our master's degrees, to get married, to have children. Those were the happiest days of my life. But then, during my senior year, just before we were about to graduate, everything fell apart, and we broke up. At the time, Eisen was fully focused on competing for the only study abroad spot offered by the Faculty of Medicine. He was so busy that it was almost impossible for us to spend any time together. I fully supported him, knowing how important that opportunity was for his future. I never wanted to become a burden to him. It was right at this critical moment that Gabriella found me. She approached me with that same arrogant attitude she always carried, But this time there was a noticeable confidence in her voice that hadn't been there before. Susanna, you know Ison's family situation isn't great. This spot could change his life. And don't forget, my father is his guardian. The final decision on whether he gets the opportunity lies entirely in my father's hands. If you continue being with him, he'll never get it. You understand what I mean, don't you? Gabriella looked at me with calm certainty, as if she was absolutely sure I would step aside for the sake of Ison's future. And in the end, I did exactly what she wanted. I didn't want to be the reason his future was jeopardized. On the day of the breakup, I carefully staged everything to make sure Ison saw what I wanted him to see. I had my father take me out to lunch and drive me back to campus, ensuring that Ison would notice us together. As expected, he did. He came to me, his expression filled with concern and confusion, asking if I was upset because he'd been too busy lately and promising that once things settled down, he would make it up to me. Only God knows how much it tore me apart inside to hear those words. But I forced myself to smile, hiding the pain that was threatening to crush me, and said the words that would sever everything between us. Ison, do you see that man? He's very wealthy. If I'm with him, I won't need to work, and I'll have plenty of money. But what can you offer me? If I remember correctly, you're still paying off student loans, aren't you? I've thought it over carefully, and I prefer the life of the rich. I saw his fists clench tightly, the veins in his hands bulging from the pressure. But in the end, he didn't argue. He looked at me one last time, silently turned around, and walked away. Just like that, our story ended. For the next 6 years, we never saw each other again. After the breakup, I buried myself in my studies and graduated. I heard no news about him. But just 2 months later, I fainted and was rushed to the hospital. That's when I found out I was pregnant. I still remember the sudden pain on the back of my hand as I slowly regained consciousness, only to see Ison right in front of me, removing the needle from my vein. His face was so close it made my heart race. Calm and professional, he said, "I've prescribed some medication for you. The instructions are inside the bag. Come back tomorrow afternoon for the next infusion." His voice was steady, like any responsible doctor talking to a patient. Before I could respond, my son chimed in with his cheerful innocence. "Thanks, man. Tomorrow I'll bring you something to eat to thank you for saving my mom." My son was naturally sociable, and sometimes I wondered if that part of his personality was inherited from me or perhaps from Ison. Ison replied coolly, "Dude, I'm not a kid. I don't need your treats." Sensing the dangerous direction the conversation might take, I hurried out of bed, quickly pulling my son aside before he could accidentally reveal any family secrets. "Thank you for everything today. We'll leave now," I said, politely cutting the conversation short and dragging my good son away. It was already late when we returned home. My son couldn't fight off sleep and dozed off in the car. Carrying him upstairs, I couldn't help but think how these years of being a single mother had made my arms strong enough to lift him effortlessly. The next morning, my fever had finally subsided and the dizziness was gone. As we sat at the table for breakfast, my son looked at me with a strangely serious expression. "Mom, I dreamed about that guy last night. He made me laugh in my dream." Hearing this, my curiosity was instantly piqued. "Oh, what did you dream about?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Ison had clearly left a strong impression on him. My son frowned, his little lips pouting. "I dreamed that Uncle said he was my dad." His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I nearly choked on my milk, coughing violently as my throat burned. "My dear son, why would you say something so shocking? Do you want to send your mom straight to heaven?" After a long pause to catch my breath, I finally composed myself and said, "Son, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. That uncle isn't your father." Although, in reality, he was. But I couldn't tell him. Mainly because I feared I wouldn't win a custody battle if the truth came out. My son, fortunately, seemed to accept my answer and even smiled mischievously. "That's good, because if he was my dad, I'd be worried you'd fall in love with him and not focus on your work. Then your editor wouldn't pay you, and we'd have no money to live." His sarcastic tone made me realize that he had clearly inherited my way with words. Not wanting to dwell on the subject any longer, I quickly changed topics. Thankfully, he had grown up used to not having a father and didn't question it much, which brought me some relief. Now that I was almost fully recovered, I threw myself into finishing my manuscript. Our living expenses for the next month depended entirely on this job. For the sake of my son, I was even willing to temporarily overcome my lifelong procrastination habit. That day, I was so busy writing that I completely forgot about the infusion appointment Ison had scheduled for me. When my phone rang, I was still half asleep, lost in my work. "Hello? Who's calling?" I answered groggily. Honestly, I never expected the call to be from Ison. After how ugly our breakup had been, it was hard to believe he still had my number. Plus, he had changed his number years ago, so I never would have guessed it was him. His cold voice came through the phone, sharp and direct. "In half an hour, meet me at the hospital." The chill in his tone was unmistakable, and it took me only a second to recognize his voice. After all, even after 6 years, I could never forget it. Still, I didn't react right away. "Why should I go to the hospital?" I asked. "Infusion," he answered, his voice full of restraint as if trying not to lose his temper. His words reminded me of the instructions he had given the night before. I had completely forgotten that I was supposed to come back for another treatment. But my fever had already gone down. I didn't need another infusion. More importantly, I simply didn't want to see him again. The pressure was too much. I was terrified that if I spent any more time around him, I might accidentally say something that would expose the truth that my son was his son. I thought my refusal would end the conversation, but I didn't expect Ison to issue a quiet but chilling threat. "If I don't see you in half an hour, I won't mind coming to your house to look for you." His words made me laugh nervously at first. In my mind, I thought, "You don't even know where I live. Do whatever you want." But I barely had 3 seconds of satisfaction before the realization hit me like a slap. My address was listed in my medical records from yesterday. I immediately panicked and shouted, "No need. I'll come right now." I couldn't let him show up at my house. My son was still home, and no matter how little they resembled each other, blood was unpredictable. In the end, I had no choice but to accept my fate and head to the hospital. As I was about to leave, my son still asked with genuine concern, "Mom, are you really sure you don't want me to come with you?" I nodded with confidence. "I'm sure. Very sure." Then, half joking, half worried, I added, "Martin, if you go and see that guy again and start dreaming he's your dad, you'd basically be volunteering yourself to be someone's son for free. That would be a terrible loss for you." As expected, my clever son wasn't easily fooled. He simply gave me a look, shut the door in my face, and let me go handle my mess alone. I took a taxi to the hospital by myself. As the car moved through the streets, I pulled out my makeup kit and carefully retouched my face. After what happened the previous night, I needed to salvage some of my lost dignity. Somewhere deep inside, there was still that stubborn part of me that wanted to prove to Ison that I was doing perfectly fine, fueled by this ridiculous sense of pride I couldn't shake off. When I arrived at the hospital, I headed straight to Ison's office and tried to calmly explain my situation. "Actually, my fever has already gone down. I really don't need any more infusions." Thankfully, this time, my brain listened to me, and I resisted the urge to foolishly grab his hand to check my temperature like last time. That would have been beyond humiliating. But, as always, Ison barely glanced at me before responding coldly, "Are you the doctor? Or am I the doctor?" That single sentence hit me like a direct strike from the academic genius himself. Not willing to give up just yet, I quickly tried to negotiate. "Can you at least shorten the time? I really need to finish my manuscript. If I don't get it done, my editor won't pay me, and whether my son and I can afford to eat meat or just vegetables next month depends entirely on this." My desperate plea for survival didn't seem to move him. Instead, Ison looked at me with his usual sarcastic smirk, as if he saw right through me, and asked, "So, you've already burned through your late husband's inheritance?" That question rendered me speechless. Of course, I didn't have a husband or any inheritance. I had no choice but to make up something on the spot. Obviously, you've never raised a child before. Raising a child is like raising a walking money pit. My husband's money was devoured long ago. My poor son, once again, I had to use him as my shield. In my mind, I silently promised him an extra egg in his next meal as a small thank you for being my excuse yet again. Ison didn't say anything further. He simply gave me one last look and turned away to prepare the medication. Clearly, he wasn't interested in prolonging this conversation any longer, and honestly, I was relieved. The less we talked, the less likely I was to trip over my own lies. After preparing the medicine, he led me back to the same hospital room as the previous night and started the infusion. As he inserted the needle, it stung more than usual. I couldn't help but suspect he did it on purpose, but I had no evidence to prove it. Staring at the slow drip of medication, I couldn't help but wonder how to make the liquid flow faster, so I could leave sooner. But before I could even move, his cold voice rang out next to me. "If you don't want your child to bury you prematurely, don't touch it." I turned to him in shock. How did he always seem to know exactly what I was thinking? I wasn't going to. I laughed awkwardly, trying to defuse the situation. Ison didn't even bother looking at me. He simply turned and walked away, leaving me once again with a view of his retreating back. Not even 6 years abroad had changed his personality one bit. Left alone, I tried distracting myself by scrolling through my phone, but my mind refused to settle, as if I had downed 10 cups of coffee. Over an hour later, the infusion was finally complete, and I was ready to leave. Ison returned just in time to remove the needle. But before I could stand up, the door opened, and fate once again decided to play its cruel little game. The voice I heard made my stomach turn. "Ison, my dad invited you to dinner tonight. Don't forget." Gabriella walked in, speaking casually to Ison before locking eyes with me. Compared to 6 years ago, her confidence had clearly grown. She greeted me with that same fake sweetness. "Susanna, how long has it been since we last saw each other?" I forced a tight, polite smile, but didn't respond. I had no desire to exchange pleasantries with her. The atmosphere was already suffocating, but Gabriella continued to maintain her perfectly rehearsed harmony, as if this were some casual reunion between old acquaintances. "Ison told me this morning that he saw you. I heard your son is quite grown now." "That's wonderful news." The moment she said those words, I immediately recognized her tactic. She was trying to plant seeds of doubt in Ison's mind, subtly reminding him that I had a child and hinting that there could never be anything between us again. Clearly, she wasn't as composed as she pretended to be. I had overestimated her calmness. But of course, I refused to let her get the upper hand. I smiled confidently and replied, "Yes, it's a great blessing. Having a child fulfills everything." If she wanted to play the happiness card, I could play it better. The less I cared about what she cared about, the more victorious I felt. Gabriella, unwilling to be outdone, added sweetly while glancing at Ison, "I want to have a child soon too." Her desire was written all over her face, so bright it was almost blinding. In that moment, I had to admit I had completely lost. These past 6 years had been in vain. My level still wasn't enough to surpass Gabriella's, and the frustration was eating me alive. Gabriella flashed me one last victorious smile before turning to Ison. "Ison, I won't take up any more of your time. I've got things to do. Don't forget about dinner tonight." She walked away gracefully, completely crushing me as the ex-girlfriend. But I had no intention of standing there as their emotional punching bag. My son was waiting for me at home. Catching up was far less important than him. Smiling faintly, I waved and walked out with my head held high, silently telling myself that I didn't care what they did. But before I left, I clearly noticed Ison's expression darken. If Gabriella thought she could provoke me, she was wrong. Paying people back in kind was something I was quite good at. As I walked faster toward the hospital exit, I couldn't wait to get out of this cursed place. But I hadn't even reached the door when someone called out to me, "Let me take you home." I turned around, startled to see Ison standing behind me. Despite my brisk pace, he had caught up easily with those long legs of his. I looked at him in confusion, wondering what was going through his mind. After everything I had done to humiliate him during our breakup, it was already a miracle he hadn't tried to kill me, and now, unbelievably, he was offering to drive me home. The truth was, he had dinner plans with Gabriella at her father's house, and I really didn't want to waste his time or hold him up from attending his lovely family gathering. For once, I had a chance to tease him, and I wasn't about to let it slip. I cast him a look of contempt, mimicking his usual condescending stare. Honestly, I'd perfected the art of imitating his expressions after all these years. If nothing else, I had truly mastered sarcasm from the best. Strangely enough, my teasing seemed to lift his mood. His face softened a bit, and I couldn't help but wonder if he had somehow developed some kind of twisted resistance after spending so many years abroad. Maybe it was better to stay away from him altogether. "Doctor, I'm leaving. You can do as you wish," I said quickly, trying to make my escape. Without waiting for his response, I turned and began to walk away, but he reached out and grabbed me by the back of my neck. What was it with this man, and this bad habit of grabbing me like I was a stray cat? I was not a pet that needed her owner's hand on her neck. I took a deep breath, forcing down my rising frustration, and managed a tight smile. "Medical genius Ison. Do you need something else from me?" Without answering, he simply lifted me up and practically dragged me toward his car. I felt like a dog being walked by its owner. "Ison, let me go," I protested, but he turned his head slightly, giving me one of his signature mocking looks. "Oh, you don't call me doctor anymore, Susanna? Feeling guilty for all the horrible things you did back then?" His words hit hard. I didn't have the strength to fight back because, deep down, I did feel guilty about how I had hurt him when we broke up. In the end, I surrendered and allowed him to lead me to his car. As we approached it, I saw that Ison now drove a Mercedes G-Class. Clearly, he had done very well for himself over these years. As he started the engine, his cold voice broke the silence. "What's the matter? Do you regret breaking up with me now? You never expected me to make this much money, did you?" He scoffed and stepped on the gas. I refused to let him have the last word. Of course I don't regret it. My late husband's inheritance could buy several of these. Since Ison was so convinced that I had burned through a fortune, I might as well brag and play along. Still, as I sat there, I couldn't help but feel the temperature inside the car drop drastically. This freezing air somehow perfectly matched his unstable personality. After 20 minutes of uncomfortable silence, we finally arrived at my building. "I'll walk you upstairs," he offered as I opened the door, hoping to sneak away quickly. "Won't you invite me in for a cup of tea?" My heart sank. Was this man insane? All I wanted was to go inside, work on my manuscript, and fight my procrastination. Why did he insist on making everything more complicated? "My husband doesn't like strange men in the house," I replied sharply, using my non-existent deceased husband as my shield once again. "Your husband is dead," he shot back immediately, clearly remembering my previous lies perfectly. "My husband was a jealous man when he was alive. I'm afraid if you come in, he'll climb out of his grave and strangle you." I continued, lying with a completely straight face. The truth didn't matter as long as he got the message that I didn't want him inside. "Susanna, are you only aging on the outside? Is your brain not growing with it?" His words stung. Furious, I was about to insult him back, but the moment I turned around, I was met with his deep, intense gaze. His black eyes stared into mine, making me feel so flustered that my limbs froze. Without another word, I spun around and ran into my apartment like a scared little rabbit. Finally, I'd escaped that walking headache named Ison. I knocked on the door, calling for my son to open it. The moment the door swung open and I saw his innocent face, my heart flooded with happiness. But then I noticed something strange in his expression. My son frowned and looked behind me, his face on the verge of tears. "Mom, I saw that guy again. He's going to show up in my dreams tonight and try to be my dad again and take advantage of me." His words made my blood run cold. It was broad daylight. Why was my son talking such nonsense? I nervously followed his gaze and looked behind me, and there was Ison, standing right outside my door, casually leaning against the frame. My expression froze immediately. So he really had followed me all the way up, all for a stupid cup of tea. "What did you dream about?" Ison asked, bending slightly to speak to my son over my shoulder. Hearing him mention the dream made me panic. I quickly pulled my son into the apartment, trying to physically separate them before anything dangerous could be said. There were no dreams.
Ha ha ha.
Children don't dream, I answered far too loudly, forcing an unnatural laugh. But my son, ever the truth-teller, softly corrected me from behind. "Mom, I do dream." "No, you don't." I snapped back, cutting him off immediately. I could feel my nerves unraveling. My son always became especially talkative in front of his father. If I didn't stop him, he might even start revealing how many pairs of socks he owned. Desperate, I flashed him a warning look, begging him with my eyes to stop talking. But today, our usual mother-son understanding seemed to fail miserably. "Mom, are you having an eye twitch?" "Uncle, you should check on her quickly." My son called out with genuine concern. Wonderful. He really did care for me, but his timing couldn't have been worse. Ison stepped forward, leaning in closer, and I instinctively froze. My entire body tensed up as my limbs refused to move. "Let me take a look." "Don't worry. I won't charge you. Consider it a free consultation," he teased as his face moved closer and closer to mine. My nerves finally snapped. "Can you not get so close?" I flinched, raising my hand to push him away. I don't smoke anymore, so I'm not wasting any medical resources." Trying to regain some composure, I forced a smile and quickly excused myself. "Doctor, I'm home safe. You can go now. Thanks for bringing me back." I flashed him a polite grin and tried to close the door behind me, silently begging him to leave. But of course, Ison ignored my hints and turned to my son instead. "Hey, buddy. I brought your mom home safely. Shouldn't you invite me in for a cup of tea?" My son hesitated, clearly torn. I knew exactly what was coming. Sure enough, after a brief pause, he looked at me seriously and said, "Mom, our teacher says we should always be grateful. Let's invite Uncle in and thank him properly." I nearly collapsed on the spot. My son, who usually had such a high IQ, was suddenly acting like his brain had completely stopped working in front of his father. But of course, I wasn't someone who gave up easily. "Martin, Uncle still has work to do. We can't disturb him from saving lives." "I'm not working today," Ison replied calmly, refusing to let me off the hook. I nearly ground my teeth into dust. "Then what are you doing at the hospital?" I snapped in frustration. He smiled faintly. "I was bored, so I came to help out." My blood was boiling. "Of course, you're not bored, you just came here to make my life miserable." Clearly, it was because he'd eaten too much. Since that was the case, as a doctor, Ison probably thought a cup of tea would help him digest. He seemed determined to have that cup of tea no matter what.
Fine.
I just hoped he'd finish it quickly and leave. He entered my home without an ounce of shame, taking off his shoes in the process. My gaze immediately darted to the empty shoe rack. There were no men's shoes here. He'd have to settle for walking barefoot. Actually, there were some shoes my father wore when he visited, but I didn't want him wearing those either. Strangely, instead of looking annoyed, he smiled as if walking around barefoot in my house made him happy. As he stepped further inside, his eyes scanned the entire apartment. If I didn't know better, I'd think he was here to burglarize the place. "Martin, take Uncle to the couch. Mommy will get you some snacks." This was already the second time Ison had visited, yet he still hadn't noticed anything. He probably didn't even realize my son was his son. For now, I felt relieved and headed to the kitchen. When I came out, I saw the two of them chatting animatedly, as if they had known each other for years. "Why isn't there anything of your dad's in the house?" Ison asked. "Mom says she put everything away because it makes her too sad to see his things," Martin answered innocently. "She really loved my dad. I've even seen her cry in secret." My son's words made Ison's face instantly darken.
Perfect.
If he thought he was coming here to make me suffer, he'd better think again. I was going to play this game all the way. Yes, I added with a perfectly straight face. My son's father and I were very much in love before he passed away. Every time I think about him, I get sad, so I put away all his belongings. Technically, aside from the he's dead part, everything else was true. The first 2 years after our breakup, I really did cry almost every night, whether from heartbreak or while holding my son in my arms. Dr. Ison, have some tea. My husband left it before he passed. There's not much left, so you're lucky to have some. I smiled sweetly as I poured him a cup, offering it with a sincere expression. If delivering finishing blows was an art, then I was Picasso. Ison's face grew darker by the second, as if he was ready to crush the teacup with his bare hands, or better yet, crush me. But I continued playing dumb, stoking the fire even more. Doctor, drink up. Uncle, the tea my mom makes is really good, my son chimed in enthusiastically. Under both our expectant gazes, Ison finally raised the cup and drank it all in one gulp. Thankfully, I had let it cool beforehand. Otherwise, he probably would have burned his mouth.
TSK.
TSK. TSK. He set the cup down forcefully on the table and stood up abruptly. I have things to do. I'm leaving. Wow, leaving so soon? That's too bad, I said cheerfully, practically unable to hide the joy on my face. I nearly clapped as I saw him approach the door. Don't forget your dinner appointment with your father-in-law. Don't be late, I added with a not-so-innocent reminder as he walked out. His face twisted into something unreadable, and that expression haunted me for days afterward. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his half-smiling, half-annoyed face. It irritated me endlessly. But oddly enough, there was one upside to my sleepless nights. Since I couldn't sleep, I got out of bed and wrote. For the first time in ages, I finished my manuscript ahead of schedule. When my editor received it, she practically declared that the sun must have risen in the west that morning. After that chance encounter with Ison, I thought I wouldn't see him again. I didn't bother looking up any news about him either. By now, I figured he and Gabriella were probably married. Once the month ended, my life returned to its usual rhythm, which meant slipping back into my lazy procrastination mode. Meanwhile, my son switched back into his usual role as my personal taskmaster. Mom, if you don't write now, the editor will come yell at you again at the end of the month. Son, how about we stop watching Journey to the West for a while? I tried to bargain. Why couldn't my son be more like Sun Wukong? Instead, he was acting more like Tang Sanzang, always nagging me like a monk chanting scriptures. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I frowned, wondering who could possibly be visiting at this hour. I got up to answer it. The moment I opened the door, I froze. Standing right there was Ison. Why are you here again? I asked, barely finishing my sentence when he brushed right past me, as if he owned the place. Without hesitation, he took off his shoes and slipped into a pair of house slippers like he had done it 100 times before. Did this man think my apartment was his own home?
Wow.
Uncle Doctor, you're here, my son greeted him with obvious delight. Was there some kind of telepathic connection between these two? Father and son bonding as if they were completely synced. The pair casually held hands and went straight to the couch, completely ignoring me. Hey, last I checked, I'm the owner of this house, I shouted, glaring at Ison, who sat there like a king returning to his palace. My anger boiled over as I marched over. Ison, what the hell are you doing here? He looked up at me, his face visibly exhausted, with red veins streaking through his eyes. Susanna, I'm so tired. Those simple words hit me like a punch to the gut. It had been 6 long years since I last heard him call my name like that. Instantly, memories of college flooded my mind, his voice calling my name softly, full of tenderness and affection. My throat tightened, and my emotions bubbled dangerously close to the surface. Trying to compose myself, I muttered, "Whatever," and quickly retreated to my bedroom before I completely lost control. I leaned back against the headboard, heart pounding as I replayed the events of the past few days. I was emotionally exhausted. What exactly was Ison trying to do? It wasn't long before I heard small footsteps approaching my door. I didn't even need to look, I knew it was my son. Sure enough, seconds later, he ran into the room and threw himself into my arms. "Mom, why aren't you playing?" he asked sweetly. I pinched his chubby cheeks hard. Seeing how happy he was playing with his father, even if unknowingly, made a wave of jealousy bubble up inside me. "Uncle fell asleep," he added. I froze for a moment. Letting my son play alone for a bit, I tiptoed out to check. When I reached the living room, I saw Ison sprawled out on the sofa, sound asleep, but his brows furrowed as if he was deep in troubled dreams. I thought to myself, he has a successful career, a powerful father-in-law, and everything most people could only dream of. What more could he possibly want? I hadn't intended to do anything, but eventually, I couldn't help myself. I quietly fetched a blanket and draped it over him. Still, I was careful not to cover his face. The last thing I needed was for him to suffocate and turn my apartment into a crime scene. As I returned to my room, my son climbed back into my arms, his little face filled with a strange confusion. I could tell something was weighing heavily on his young mind. "Son, do you have something you want to say to Mom?" I asked gently, sensing that my son had something on his mind, the way only a mother could. And just like that, he launched into one of his non-stop streams of chatter. "Mom, I think that guy looks like my dad." The words hit me like a slap across the face, my expression nearly splitting in half. What did my sweet child just say? How did he figure anything out? And more importantly, could I take back the question I had just foolishly asked? Why did I even open this door in the first place? Trying to stay calm, I followed the motherly instinct of fishing for the truth carefully. "Why do you think that, sweetie?" I asked tentatively. Propping his little chin on his hand, he answered with shocking seriousness, "A man's sixth sense. I just feel like he's my dad." My face filled with imaginary black lines. "Son, do you want to kill your young mother with this kind of discomfort?" My child, with his so-called sixth sense, had unknowingly hit the bullseye, but as his mother, I had no choice but to smother this budding intuition before it grew dangerous. "Son, your perception is a little off. You simply wish you had a dad, that's all," I said in my most serious tone, lying so smoothly that it felt like second nature by now. He looked at me for a moment, pursed his lips, and finally nodded, seemingly convinced. I had just begun to celebrate my successful deflection when he suddenly dropped another bomb on me. "Mom, Grandpa says you should go back to the village for a blind date. If you keep being an old spinster, you'll embarrass him." Another wave of black lines appeared on my forehead. What had my dad been teaching him? Fortunately, my son was still young and easily distracted. After a few moments of conversation, his attention shifted, and eventually, he grew tired and fell asleep in my arms, one child asleep inside, one man asleep outside. The whole house was so quiet that it felt like a crime not to take a nap myself. When I woke up later and stepped into the living room, all I found was a neatly folded blanket on the sofa Ison had already left. At that moment, a strange sense of disappointment washed over me. Realizing what I was feeling, I scolded myself internally for indulging in such ridiculous emotions. Then I noticed a message on my phone. Something came up at the hospital. I left. Don't overthink. Of course, it was from Ison. I didn't bother replying. I let the message fade into nothingness. I thought that would be the end of it, but to my surprise, messages from him started arriving every single day afterward, almost like harassment. What disturbed me most wasn't the frequency, but the content. It felt like someone else had stolen his phone and was texting me as some sort of bizarre prank. Messages like, "It might rain today. Remember to bring an umbrella when you pick Martin up. The heat's pretty intense lately. You and Martin should stay hydrated. Summer's here. It's good to eat some bitter melon to cool down. Pick some up when you go grocery shopping." They kept coming one after another, like an endless stream. I couldn't help but wonder, "Ison, when did you become so naggy? Did the water overseas have some weird hormones that turned you into a worrywart?" In the end, I never replied. Honestly, I had no idea how to respond, so I just let him keep talking into the void. A few days later, one afternoon, I was so deeply caught up discussing an outline with my editor that I completely lost track of time. By the time we finished, it was already way past my son's school dismissal time. My heart jumped into my throat. I panicked and dashed out the door, wearing nothing but flip-flops. I've raised my son alone all these years, and while I may seem laid back most of the time, when it comes to my child, I get extremely anxious about the slightest risk. When I arrived at the kindergarten gate, what I saw nearly blinded me. Ison was standing there, hugging my son. In that instant, 100 scenarios raced through my mind. Has he discovered the truth? Is he here to fight for custody? Can I win? Will my son choose to stay with me? Consumed by my spiraling thoughts, I ran straight toward them. Ison, let go of my son. If you dare try to take him from me, I swear I'll fight you to the bitter end. My voice echoed like thunder on a cloudless day, drawing shocked stares from nearby parents and even startling a woman who was eyeing Ison nervously, probably wondering if he was a child abductor. But my son, completely unfazed, beamed with excitement. Mom, Uncle said he's taking me to the amusement park. Let's go, hurry. Ison was immediately cleared of all suspicions, casually walking ahead while holding my son like they'd been best friends for years. Watching them walk together, I bit my lip, refusing to admit that I was jealous. Why was my son so comfortable with him? Noticing my hesitation, Ison stopped, turned, and flashed me that infuriatingly charming smile. Susanna, hurry up. That smiley so familiar, so seductive it made my stomach flip. How shameless. He was using his masculine charm to mess with me. And yet, against my better judgment, I found myself falling for it all over again. After so many years, I still hadn't built up any immunity to him. We drove to the amusement park in Ison's car. My son was practically bouncing with excitement before we even got out. After Ison accompanied him on every ride, his joy reached new heights. I stood outside the fences, watching Ison ride bumper cars with my son, both of them laughing freely. My heart swelled with a complicated mix of happiness and awkwardness. The childhood of a fatherless child really was different. That unique kind of fatherly love, I simply couldn't replace it. Mom, Uncle is amazing. He made everyone else stand aside for me. My son ran over, holding Ison's hand tightly, his face glowing with pride as his mouth chattered nonstop. Uncle even went into the haunted house with me. Mom, you're too scared to go in. Next time, let's come again with Uncle. Only now did I realize my son could outtalk a flock of 100,000 ducks. Eventually, he grew so exhausted that he fell asleep, giving my poor ears a much-needed break. When we arrived home, I was carrying my son upstairs, but as soon as I got out of the car, Ison snatched my sleeping child from my arms. I glared at him furiously, but couldn't reach to take my son back. His long legs and tall frame made him impossible to compete with. After getting home and settling my son into bed, I finally reached my limit. My heart was a stormy sea as I planted myself on the couch, determined to confront Ison once and for all. The moment he stepped out of my son's room, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Ison, what the hell are you trying to do? He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he calmly walked over, grabbed my son's tiny stool, and sat across from me like he was preparing for an important negotiation. Honestly, if the atmosphere weren't so tense, I might have laughed. Do you even know how heavy you are? If you break that stool, you're buying a new one. My eyes narrowed as I crossed my arms, glaring at him. Tell me, what are you up to? First you sneak into my house, then you take my son out like you're some kind of family. What the hell do you want, Ison? My voice was rising dangerously close to a full-on explosion. He suddenly stood up, placing both hands on the coffee table, leaning in so close that I could feel his breath on my skin. His eyes locked onto mine, and his voice took on that dangerously magnetic tone that always left me defenseless. Susanna, don't you understand what I mean? His unexpected flirtation made my ears burn and my heartbeat quicken. Why you? Stay where you are. How am I supposed to understand what you mean when you're this close? I stammered as his presence overwhelmed me. This man, this damn Ison, always knew how to disarm me. When would I finally build up immunity to his charm? But then he said words I never expected. Susanna, I want to be Martin's stepfather. My entire body nearly slid off the couch in shock. What? Be my child's stepfather? But of course, he didn't know that Martin was actually his own son. Still, why would someone as proud and arrogant as Ison want to stoop to being someone else's child's stepfather? I studied him from head to toe, trying to see if he'd hit his head recently. Ison, did you get knocked on the head today? What kind of nonsense are you spouting? He paused, clearly holding himself back before continuing with a rare seriousness in his voice. You lost your husband. Martin lost his father. I'm single. Why can't we just start a family together? I'm not joking, Susanna. I'm completely serious. Think about it. After he left, I sat alone on the sofa, completely lost in thought. No matter how I tried to make sense of it, I just couldn't understand why Ison, with his proud personality, would willingly volunteer to be my son's stepfather. This simply wasn't like him. Not at all. Before long, my son woke up from his nap, rubbing his sleepy eyes and wandering barefoot into the living room. Mom, where's Uncle? The first thing out of his mouth was a question about Ison. As his mother, did I even have a place in his heart anymore? Come here, sweetheart. Mommy wants to ask you something. He perked up and looked at me seriously. Why do you like Uncle so much? It was something I had been wondering for days. After only a few short meetings, why was my son so attached to Ison? Was it really their blood bond calling out? He climbed into my lap and spoke with surprising maturity. Uncle feels different. Other kids at kindergarten say their parents take them to play. Uncle plays with me too. He makes me feel like I have a dad. I like it a lot. Mom, next time, don't let Uncle sleep on the couch. That's kind of sad. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his words. He even knew sleeping on the couch was pitiful. Staring at my son's innocent face, my thoughts wandered back to what Ison had proposed being Martin's stepfather. And for the first time, I seriously considered it. No matter who the man was, Martin deserved to have a father figure. Growing up without one would leave gaps in his life that I, as his mother, could never fully fill. For years, I thought I could do it all alone, but maybe that wasn't enough. How would you feel if Uncle really became your dad? I asked. My son's face instantly lit up, practically bouncing with excitement. Truly, the saying like father, like son wasn't wrong. After that, Ison started visiting frequently. Each time he came, he brought an endless supply of snacks and toys, completely spoiling Martin as if he were bribing him. I had to admit, Ison's genius mind knew exactly where my weakness lay, my son. Pleasing my child was the fastest way to soften me. But he didn't stop there. He was also incredibly attentive to maidowing the laundry, cooking, and taking over nearly all of the household chores. If it weren't for his full-time job, I had no doubt he'd come running the moment I snapped my fingers. It was through this routine that I learned something surprising. He and Gabriella were no longer together. All those years of Gabriella chasing Ison had amounted to nothing. But hey, I wasn't one to gossip. Still, speak of the devil and she shall appear. Gabriella suddenly invited me for coffee, and the moment I sat down, she launched into her attack. Susanna, you've been separated for 6 years. A broken mirror can't be repaired. Why are you still clinging to Ison? I didn't like her tone one bit. I wasn't going to carry the burden of guilt she was trying to lay on me. Excuse me? He's the one chasing after me. Why don't you go advise him to stop trying to be my son's stepfather? Her face twisted immediately, her smug expression freezing into something much uglier. She came here to scold me, but instead got slapped with reality. Ison would rather play stepfather than be with her. I calmly sipped my coffee, waiting for her next move. Susanna, if I could take Ison away from you once, I can do it again, she threatened. I chuckled. Why don't you tell me your methods? Maybe I'll feel threatened then. I rolled my eyes dramatically. She thought she could still scare me with the same old tricks?
6 years ago, maybe. Now?
Absolutely not. You broke up with Ison for his study abroad opportunity. Now you're not worried about his future? Let me make it clear. If you don't stay away, he'll marry me. My father can guarantee his promotion at the hospital, she said, full of confidence. After all, having a powerful father did have its advantages. But her words only reminded me of my own father, who now spent his days walking birds in the park. Ison's career had nothing to do with me anymore. Threatening me with promotions was utterly pointless. Gabriella, it's been 6 years. Can't you come up with any new tactics? I'm exhausted just listening to the same old script, I said, standing up to leave. My son's school pickup time was fast approaching, and frankly, I didn't feel like wasting another breath on her. At least the coffee and air conditioning weren't bad. That was the only upside to this meeting. Watching Gabriella seethe as I left was almost too easy. I barely made it to the door before she screamed after me. Susanna, aren't you even worried about Ison's future? But before I could respond, Ison himself appeared right beside me. My future isn't your business, Gabriella. I don't need you meddling in my life. His voice was sharp, direct, and cold, just the way I like to see him shut people down. However, while I was enjoying his perfect takedown, I suddenly felt his hand slide onto my waist. Hold on, Wo said you could put your hand there. If you don't move it, I might just chop it off. Ison, I'm doing this for your own good. Don't you understand how much my father values you? Gabriella's voice trembled on the edge of tears. His expression changed faster than a Sichuan opera mask change. Gabriella, I'll say this one last time. My life and my future aren't for you to comment on. We have no relationship, and as for your father, I'll thank him respectfully. That's all. After saying that, he grabbed my hand without another word and pulled me away. Gabriella was still frozen in place, unable to react. This drama was officially over. But before I left, I couldn't resist glancing back at her expression. It was uglier than crying. After chasing him bitterly for so many years, she now had to face the cold, hard truth that this man never even considered her his girlfriend. Her heart must have been torn into pieces. Honestly, I won't lie, I was absolutely enjoying her misery. After all, holding grudges is one of my finest traditions. Ison dragged me along with a face as dark as a thunderstorm. His grip was firm and tight. Just like the day we broke up years ago, only this time, I didn't even understand why he was so angry. The man clearly had no sense of emotional regulation. He took me straight to the parking lot, opened the car door, and practically shoved me into the passenger seat. Ison, what are you doing? Shouldn't you at least ask before kidnapping me like this? Not that I had any real choice. He locked the doors, and there was no way I could jump out at this speed. Judging by how fast he was driving, it was like he was trying to deliver me straight to my own son's wedding or funeral. I was terrified the entire way. No matter how much I asked or protested, Ison stayed silent. Eventually, the car pulled into an upscale residential complex. My eyes widened at the sight of the building.
Wow.
A mansion. My son should know his dad is filthy rich. But to his credit, Ison had built all of this on his own. He never accepted bribes or favors from anyone. Everything he had earned was purely through his own ability. Before I could even finish admiring the lavish underground parking lot, Ison dragged me straight into the elevator and up to his apartment. At that point, I had given up resisting. Since I was already here, I figured I might as well take a good look, like a countryside bumpkin visiting the big city. But clearly, Ison wasn't in the mood to let me observe anything. Susanna, you've been holding back this whole ride. Just say what you're thinking. Isn't it awkward keeping it all inside? He sat down casually across from me, but I couldn't ignore the intensity burning in his eyes, like he was about to devour me. I couldn't help but get nervous. Was he planning to murder me and steal the child for himself? He inhaled deeply several times before speaking. 6 years ago, when you broke up with me, was it because Gabriella threatened you with my study abroad opportunity? Though it was framed as a question, his tone was full of certainty. He had clearly overheard my earlier conversation at the coffee shop. But my pride wouldn't let me admit that I was the fool who sacrificed everything for him back then. Of course not. I just wanted to find myself a millionaire. He stared at me for a moment, then said calmly, "Then look at my house, my car, my bank account. Don't I look like a millionaire now? Why don't you just be with me?" As he spoke, he pulled out a bank card and placed it directly in front of me. I was utterly speechless. Should I continue playing my gold digger role, or just let it all crumble? Ison let out a heavy sigh and moved closer, gripping my shoulders with both hands. His bossy, commanding presence was strangely attractive. "Stop deflecting, Susanna. I already know the truth now. Gabriella lied to you. The study abroad placement was always awarded publicly. I earned it on my own. No one could secretly manipulate anything behind the scenes. If you had bothered to verify things properly, you wouldn't have been tricked so easily." His words left me completely stunned, and it took me several seconds to process what I was hearing. So I had been deceived by Gabriella all those years ago. I was the idiot who fell for her lies, willingly broke up for the sake of Ison's future, and then raised my child alone like some tragic heroine in a cliché romance novel. It really was like living out the most overused plotline imaginable. I should probably congratulate myself for being the leading character in this melodrama. "Susanna, are you okay?" Ison asked when he saw me spacing out for so long. His voice pulled me back to reality. I looked up at him, my lips trembling as I pouted like I was about to cry. "I want to be alone. I just found out how low my IQ actually is. It's quite depressing." Ison pulled me into his arms with a sigh, wearing the softest, most affectionate expression he'd shown since our reunion. "Susanna, let's reconcile. We've already lost 6 years. Let's not waste any more time." Academic genius, indeed his confession even sounded logical and perfectly persuasive. And honestly, his recent actions had touched me deeply. Even though I was the one who made the foolish decision back then, even though the child was also his, I still couldn't bring myself to accept him so quickly. His words melted into my skin like warm honey as he whispered against my ear, "Susanna, I really like this surprise." My cheeks flushed crimson while my heart beat like a drum. All the misunderstandings, the pain, the years apart, they all condensed into this one moment of overwhelming tenderness. And even though I wanted to stay composed, my emotions completely betrayed me. His arms tightened around me as if afraid I might vanish again, and honestly, I didn't want to go anywhere anymore. After so many years of separation, heartbreak, and miscommunication, we had finally found our way back to each other. And this time, we weren't going to let go. The next morning, as sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, I woke up in his embrace. His breathing was steady, his arms still wrapped around me protectively like I was the most precious thing in the world. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Not just for myself, but for our little family. A family that had finally been reunited. I carefully slipped out of bed, tiptoeing into the living room where my father was already playing cards with Martin. The moment my son saw me, he jumped off his grandfather's lap and ran into my arms. "Mom, where's Uncle?" he asked, his little face full of innocent curiosity. "He's still resting," I replied, running my fingers through his hair. My father watched me with a teasing grin. "You see? You've finally found the right person to build a home with." I knew my grandson would have good genes. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Life really had played one long, complicated joke on me. But somehow, everything had fallen into place. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Ison officially moved in, though to be fair, he'd basically been living here even before the confession. He handled everything like a perfect husband and father, from breakfast to bedtime stories, from taking Martin to school to fixing everything around the house. Martin adored him completely. Every time I watched them together, my heart swelled with both love and gratitude. And soon, our little family was about to grow. One morning, holding the pregnancy test in my hand, I stared at the 2 bright pink lines with wide eyes. I was pregnant again. As if on cue, Ison walked in, saw the test in my hand, and instantly understood. His face lit up like the morning sun, and without a word, he scooped me into his arms and spun me around. "Susanna, Thank you for giving me everything I missed these past 6 years, he whispered emotionally. Well, I teased, my face buried against his shoulder. I guess you'll finally get to experience raising a child from the very beginning this time. And I promise, he said, holding me tighter, no more misunderstandings. No more separation. This time, I'll be there for every moment, every smile, every tear. Months later, as we stood together in the delivery room, hand in hand, waiting to welcome our second child into the world, I couldn't help but think back to how our story had begun. So many twists, so many wrong turns, but somehow, fate had never given up on us. And as I heard the first cries of our newborn daughter fill the air, I knew deep down that everything had led us here right where we were meant to be. And that's how Susanna and Ison finally found their way back to each other after 6 years of misunderstandings, sacrifices, and fate's surprising twists. A journey filled with laughter, tears, and unexpected surprises, but in the end, love always finds its way. Thank you so much for staying with us and following this emotional story until the very end. Your support means everything to us here at Universe of Love and Anime. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more heartwarming, dramatic love tales like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends so they can experience this beautiful journey too. Your love helps us continue bringing you more amazing stories. See you in the next chapter of love.